It's live. I really am curious. I have to go on my X account and see if this pops up. This would be very interesting. I don't know. I don't see it. Oh wait, no, shit, yeah. My little guy
There
says
you go.
live.
There you go.
Little guy says live. We're on the internet. You know. Hopefully, I don't flash my social security in front of the camera.
Or leak an API key. I mean, I don't know what's worse these days, right?
Literally. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Been there. Um, But yeah, so updating you really quick. Well, there's some things obviously since we're live now. I'm not going to talk about certain things, but I will tell you I landed my first client.
Wow.
Yeah. So first small business, and this small business is not necessarily a small business because the owner of this owns 12.
Wow.
So in the case of your, situation, if you got one client that landed you 12, revenue streams, that would be pretty significant. So this is a great start for the little fledgling operation. And my team is doing really well right now.
Mhm.
They're doing code, and the Figma designs are coming together really nicely, and like you know I told you this before, but, like, this is fairly complex, like, we're building 2 apps in and of itself, that are all interconnected, the web app and the whole thing in the background, and just the massive databases, and, so it's been kinda interesting to watch it all grow, and also revise it before we even launch it, like, there's just so many you just turn around and you're like, "Oh, crap, yeah, this is supposed to do this too." And you're just like, "That actually changes the whole design now," you know? So, we had that kind of aha moment, and, it's a lot of work to even just get it to that point before we could actually install it in this person's business, because as a small business owner, know how serious, like, that is, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm bringing in software from a vendor and they, like, fuck up my very highly functional business and cause me to lose money, like, that's a huge deal. So I have that hat in the back of my mind where I'm just like, "Okay, you wanna go in there and try to make things as smoothly as they humanly possibly can be," because obviously that one launch, cascades into the other 11. And this is also a relationship that I've built over many, many years before this, and
Mhm.
actually serendipitously connected with this person. We kind of had an aha moment where, I was telling them kind of a roundabout way of like, "Oh yeah, I'm getting into this kind of thing." And she was like, "Well, I have news for you too." And she a roundabout way told me and was like, "Okay, we're actually in the same space." So so it was a very, very serendipitous moment, her as the customer and me as the vendor. And it was just like, "Okay, we have to talk more." So, but that one situation can turn into, a couple $100,000 in revenue.
Sure.
Um
Just need to solve their problems and, to your point, not mess anything up in their business operations. Are they like, is the location that you'll be working with, like, close to you physically and, over there?
Nope. So
Mm.
this is way out in the Midwest, and you have like a go-to-market strategy, and you're like, "Oh
Mhm.
yeah, I'm gonna start over here locally with myself, and then expand, and then expand, and then expand." This didn't work out like that. They were like, she's a big fish, so she has places over here, and over here, and over there, and over
Mhm.
there, and here, and like she's actually a big enough fish that, after our meeting and after I like, soft pitched her and she's like, "I agree, let's move forward." She's savvy enough and smart enough to be like, "Well, what if I refer business to you?" And I was like, "Ah, now I like where you're going here." You know what I mean? Like, so now I was spending time, like, drafting a document to, what does referrals look like, and how do you
Mhm.
structure the deal, um, as far as go to market. So, and it's different for every relationship initially. Like, this is a relationship I have with her before, and obviously I'm gonna give her more favorable terms than if I just walked off the street, you know, went through a sales process, um, but yeah, the first design partner, that's like one of the biggest kind of mile markers, for a fledgling kind of operation. It's like when you sell that first slice of pizza, once you get those ovens fired up, so, and it's never gonna be perfect, like, even with all my years of experience, like, when I opened Zeno's, like, we were burning slices left and right, and we were like, "Yeah, it's just the way the oven cooks," and it's it's not the way the oven cooks.
But over time, you mastered your tools, right? Your
Sure.
process.
Yep. Yep, exactly. So, and you just hope you don't piss enough people off that, they start to come back and yada, 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 so, you know.
Yeah, well, obviously, when you're first getting started, you want to make sure that whoever your first customers are, that they, they understand that they're early and therefore they get, um, some some chance to give some input, but you also need a little bit of grace. Um,
Yep,
and there's that old, was it Facebook, I think, adage, right? Move fast and break things.
yep,
Um, I think it's sort of like the message behind that is the same way that I'm going to say it, but I think it sounds more accurate, which is to move fast and fix things. And so I've had like two or three big migrations off of like Azure onto AWS, and then updating a bunch of my tech stack. And I've been kind of putting it off for lots of reasons, right? Wanted to ship more features,
yep,
um, had other priorities, but planned it out, and I just went, all right, well, the next week is probably going to be difficult, but we probably come out of it better. And yeah, I mean, today's the first day I've not had any phone calls or emails about it. I managed to fix two or three other problems along the way. So yeah, that's why I was wondering if they were local, because then you could physically be there and see their process, right? And even if your team was there or was on call, can quickly iterate and find the problems and make it better, right? Um,
yeah,
but
yeah,
you
in
got
this
to take
case,
the opportunity you get.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so, new new chapter, new thing, but I say new, but it's all the same, right? Like, once you've done it, even in a different field, there's so many things that you translate,
Mhm.
and, it's the rinse and repeat kinda thing,
Well, you know
So,
what's important and what you need to not get worried about, right? So, the team that you've got, is this their first rodeo, or have they been involved in a
no,
couple of things before?
no, they've done quite a few things. So this is a seasoned team, and, the work they're putting out is pretty high level. So I'm actually, um, I'm profoundly kind of surprised how this has all turned out, and, it's been kind of interesting how this all just kinda transpired, right? So, they had just come back from overseas. They're a girlfriend-boyfriend team kind of thing, which is always dangerous, right?
Mhm.
But in this case, they've been together for almost a decade, right? So, they come over from overseas, and they were like, I get a random DM one time, and they're like, "Hey, listen, and this happens to me a lot, Chris. When I say a lot, I get random DMs where people are like, "Do you know anyone who's hiring?" And I'm like, I don't know. Like, let me look. I have a pretty vast network, and like I can usually do things.
Mhm.
I've actually hired over 9 people off of Twitter, like
That's
over
crazy.
even more than that. Yeah. So, both for the restaurants and all sorts of other stuff, right? Which is kind of wild. Like you would never guess that this platform would be the way it is, but it is the ultimate connector. Like I don't think I would have access to half the people, randomly off the streets that I do, on Twitter. It's very weird. Like I've had so many billionaires that I DM with and things like that, which are kind of just weird. Um, and the craziest conversations and serendipity of things that happen, right? Um, no flexing on that crap. I really don't care about it, but like, it's just very interesting when you can meet interesting people and more often than not, because of our locations, you being in San Francisco, me being in New York, like the higher quality the network is, you know what I mean? The higher quality of the kind of person you're gonna oddly run into, you know what I mean? So yeah. So anyway, so this person jumped into to the DMs and was like, "Hey, listen, you working on anything? Can I do anything? Blah blah blah. I'll do anything, right?" And as soon as somebody says that to me, like they're like, "I will do anything." That just opens up the doors for me, like mentally, because I have that mentality towards everything.
Mhm.
I feel like anything worth doing is worth doing well, and, my that's my mantra, like, any of the restaurants I've ever opened and worked at, like, I will do the dishes, I will bust the tables, I will, do the thing, right? So whenever you have somebody who has that same mindset, work ethic, you wanna try to work with them in some capacity, and then what ended up happening is over a course of conversations we had, I started to discover like, "Oh, wait a second, actually, these people are talented." Like, this is a
Mm.
rare find, right? Like, this is a pretty unique situation, right? Um, and from that point on, the conversation evolved. I kinda put them through a little bit of a test. I said, "Hey, take a look at this little side project here." They didn't know it was a side project, and they gave honest feedback and was like, "This is what it is, and here's how I'd fix it, and da 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 da." And then once they demonstrated capability, I was just like, "Alright, so here's the deal, right? Um, I know I sent you on this tangent to go take a look at this thing, but actually, here's the dollar idea." You know what I mean?
Mhm,
And
mhm,
all of a
mhm,
sudden, it was like, "Oh, holy shit. You actually have something here. Like, this is legit. Like, this is a real thing. This is a real problem, like,
mhm,
that people are experiencing." And I knew that because I discovered the problem myself on the consumer side, and then when I started interviewing the shops, and starting to, like, understand their problem set and being like, "Oh, holy shit, I really uncovered something here," and how actually
mhm.
angry they were with their current systems, um, that was the light bulb for me. So anyway, long story short is, like I said, they came back to stateside after traveling because they were digital nomads and were able to work remote. And one of their main problems was we need a place to live, right? Like we need to like find stability and we want to be in New York. So what I ended up doing is I actually put them up in an apartment. So I put them up in Williamsburg, and they're actually in a very prime location in Williamsburg with the rest of the tech folks. And, again, they're girlfriend, boyfriend, so now they're like, they're living with each other, happy as clams in mud. They're going to all the popular restaurants in the neighborhood, like, they're really embracing it, kinda crazy, and they're working on this project, so, you know, um I'm losing money doing this, but that's with the intention of I know that I'm paying this forward and I'm paying in other
Yeah.
ways, right? They're getting equity and, and paychecks and things like that, you know? Um, so it's more than just like, me paying the rent, right? Because we also Airbnb this place, and right now, as you
Mm,
know, like New York City and, the whole World Cup, I mean, the prices are astronomical, you
mhm,
know? So, the amount of money that is in the short term, like, is being lost is very substantial, and it's like for the greater good, you know.
Yep. I
Uh,
had Airbnb going on here for most of the first 2 years of owning the business. Um, and you end up meeting people through that, right?
yep,
Not always great people, but 90% great, and then the other 10%, gives you a little bit of a life lesson sometimes, or makes you appreciate, what you have, or the opportunities you've got. But
yep.
yeah, you have to figure it out, right? So so how long are they going to be over here? Like they're here grinding on this until until it's a thing, and then who knows?
Yeah, exactly. So, I didn't necessarily put a timeline on it. It's not they know it's not a forever situation. This is
Sure,
like
sure,
really
sure.
just to get everything up and running, but like this is a pure example of how, you need to problem solve for not only just your business situation, but also the people that are working for you. And not everyone
Mhm,
is driven by a huge paycheck or anything like that. There are other ways of getting creative, that can benefit both parties in a way that, if you just have the conversation, you know what I mean? Like as a manager, I've always discovered this. Like I've been very good at putting people in places to be successful,
mhm,
like, and sometimes you just have to listen, and you just have to be like, tell me the dead honest truth. Like, what do you like, right? Like, when I interview people for restaurants, I'm like, "Do you like days or nights? Like, what do you honestly like?" If this person's a night owl, like, I'm not gonna put them on the 6 a.m., coffee making shift, you know what I mean? Like, I'd rather set them up for success and have them close, like that kinda thing.
mhm,
So
mhm,
it's a lot of just having very honest and open questions and being like, "What do you like?" Like, "What's your ideal situation, and how do you envision your future, and how do you want to evolve into it?" That's where you can get very creative with things, and I mean, I think all the big tech companies did pretty good at that too. They were like, "Oh shit, these people are staying here forever. How do we like, they're working 996, like how do we take care of them? Oh, okay, cool. Chefs. Oh, okay, cool. Like, sleeping pods and, massages and all this other, the Google stories of things. But that sets the tone for the culture though. I think that really from the very beginning allows us to craft a narrative and a story that like, this organization, we're gonna work very hard, but we're also gonna take care of you. And like you're gonna be kind of, initially as we're small, it's gonna be very family and knit, tight knit and that kind of thing. And like, we're gonna share the ups, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. So
mhm.
but yeah, so how's everything in your world?
I mean, it's still very busy. Um, I'm just constantly trying to reduce down complexity and remove redundancy, which is to say, when I bought the company, I think we had 5 different hosting services,
Jeez.
um, which, you buy apps, or you ask someone to build something and they use, whatever hosting platform that they're familiar with. So yeah, so we're now exclusively on AWS. We've got a couple of APIs that are not APS, sorry, AWS, but that's taught me a lot about how to do things properly in terms of smoke testing things, and um, having various checklists to go through. So one of those went very well, and then another one of those didn't go as well. But as I said, move fast and fix things. So
Yeah,
both of those are in a much better place. And so, do I think they'll always be on AWS? Probably not.
yeah,
But I had to pick the one that has really good uptime. Um, has a lot of features, and I could sort of deepen my knowledge of how to use it and how to use it effectively. Um, And then, yeah, I mean, I have 100 things on my list of stuff I want to do.
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep very focused on one or maybe two apps, right? Which is to say, if there's um, something that's going to happen on one of those two apps, then I'll make sure that I don't have anything critical on the other one, right?
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, there's just so many little things, James, right? It's like, a number of the apps, the guys that coded them before, they try and send the email from your email address, right? Well, lots of companies don't allow you to do that. Like Google's one, for example, right? Like I can't send an email from your Gmail account, right? But I could send an email from my domain, right, at zoomify.com. So whatever it's at notifications or invoices or payments or whatever,
Yeah.
and put your business name as the from, right? So it says from, James Shields, but it's actually come from notifications at zoomify.com. And then you can put the reply to, which would be your email, right?
Mm.
And so that means that when the email goes out, it's always going to get delivered as long as the email address that we're sending it to is accurate. But then when they hit reply, like their email client will just pick up that it now needs to go to your email address. So it seems like such a small thing, right? But
Yeah.
it was a huge
It's
headache and a
yeah.
frustration for lots of our customers. And we also had two email API providers, right? SendGrid and AWS Simple Email Service.
Yeah.
So now we moved off SendGrid and we're using one. And so, reduced down the complexity of that and now made it a lot more streamlined. I understand how that all works with identities and templates and all these sorts of things. So just trying to build a lot of that kind of foundational shared architecture,
Uh-huh.
um, which is going to mean that as I bring more of the apps over and update them, like it's, 80, 90% of it's the same, right? It's
Yeah.
just a different app name, a different table in a database or something like that. Um, so yeah, and my merchants have been keeping me very busy. One of my apps in particular has a lot of middle-aged, mainly uh, women, but there are some men there as well from the south, and so they don't hold back on their feedback, and that goes both ways, right? When they're delighted, you really know, and when they're frustrated, you really know. So had a
Yeah.
couple emails typed out, in half all caps, and other derogatory kind of comments in there. But I mean, it's hard, but I try not to let it affect me, right? Because I know that that's just a temporary, state that they're in, and there might be other things going on in their business that
For sure.
I can't affect. And if I focus on fixing it so that doesn't happen again and make it better, then hopefully they don't uninstall my app and
Yeah.
they'll come back and be like, "Oh, you fixed it, thanks so much." And hey, by the way, my friend wants to join up. So I am starting to see a lot more of that. And again, I think it's because I'm really focused on one of the apps or two of the apps intently, right? And just trying to understand um, how they work and how they could be better. I similar to your kind of story about um, having some sort of aha moments when you're trying to support different scenarios or add a new feature, right? And you're like, oh, we set this all up wrong. Like it doesn't do all the things you need to do. Um, I have another app. I mean, it's a platform in itself. It's just been in refactor inception for like almost a year, because
Jeez.
every time I like go, oh yeah, it'd be great if I could like have device provisioning and management and send like notifications to those apps so that I don't need to, release a new version of the app. Like I can uh, do things like synchronously. That took out 2 months, right? And then it's like, oh, and then there's this other, like there's just been so much of that. And so if I'd have shipped it earlier, um, that probably would have been better. But then you're kind of locked in because now every time you want to change something, you can't break the people that are using it, right? So it's like not only do I want to make it better, but I need to find a way to migrate all the people that were doing it the other way and not break that, and then give them the new feature or the new setting. So
Yeah,
yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with that. I mean, I love solving problems, right?
yeah,
I've become like the tools that are available now are just, I mean, it's ridiculous, right?
incredible. Yeah.
Have you which provider, which IDE are you using now? Are you using Cursor, using Codex?
Yeah, it's crazy. So I've been using Cursor, Codex, Claude, and ChatGTP, the 4 actually,
Wow.
for different kind of functionality and different businesses. So, currently I'm actually building two businesses right now in tandem that are new-ish, right?
Hmm.
So, like I have domain knowledge in one of the business lines that I like deep domain knowledge. And so that I was just like, all right, I have to do this. Like I'm one of the handful of people on the planet that could pull this off, right? So I need to do this, right? So that line of business, essentially I'm letting Codex and ChatGTP kind of, deal with it. And then the other business is just Claude. And then Codex is just kind of popping in there occasionally whenever I either hit limits or I find that, one is pretty good at doing one and one is
Right.
terrible at the other, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, so even for example, like, I actually will take images and video for the websites, with Google, with Gemini, right? Because I pay for workspace for one of the businesses, and then I'll actually plug it into Claude and be like, "Incorporate this video and image onto the website," and that has been working really well.
Mm.
And then as far as, like, getting, the documentation of things, right? Like, I will definitely use, ChatGTP and, Claude for, like, the base level kinda prompts, so, like, PRDs, I'll have them kind of spin up a PRD, which I'll work off of, or what I've been doing a lot lately is, like, business plan, and then, that'll break down all the different segments and lines and things that I need to focus on, and then I'll take domain knowledge and then I'll put that, into ChatGTP and I'll say, I want it structured like this from now
Mm.
on for this particular thing. And, for example, like, okay, recipe cards, right? I have a specific way of doing recipe cards where I'm like, this is exactly how I want it, right? Like
Mhm.
recipe, process, to make the thing and then to bake the thing, right? So, so it's kind of like that little thing. And just a lot of that, and I spend a lot of time, especially with these 2 businesses in their early stages, just thinking about the systems, right? I think about, how do you generate money? What are your costs gonna be, right? So, in software, I have no idea what my cost of goods sold is, right? Like, I'm still trying to process that. For this one particular app because, and I know I'm bouncing between the 2 here, but this one particular app has, an AI component, an actual server, like databases and all these different things where it's pulling from, email, text, like the whole thing, right? Twilio, freaking, all these services. There's like 20 different vendors for me software wise. And I don't know how, when it gets out into the real world, how many AI tokens one user will use, you know what I mean? Like, and I'll have to figure out how to, cap that or structure that or tier that in a
Mhm.
certain way that's not going to bankrupt my business and drive my cost of goods to infinity, you know? 'Cause there was in the early days, there was, like, a thing going around Twitter where people are, like, using chatbots to answer questions that they would just ask ChatGTP because they were, they ran out of tokens or whatever, so then they'd go to AWS and they would just ask the AWS thing and be like, "Hey, how do you bake this?" Like, and for whatever reason, it would spit out, the knowledge. I don't know if that's true anymore, but, um But yeah, it's just that kind of thing, you know? So, getting back to the refactoring thing, like, what advice would you give somebody who, because you're coding your own stuff, right? And you're the owner, you're the coder, the technical person, you wear those many hats that we talked about. How are you incorporating people to come in and help you with something? And then how are you approaching each individual product? Are you actually taking the AI and having them, go into one specific section of code and be like, "Hey, take a look at this. This doesn't feel, look, or operate the way that I want it to, or it's not, or it's just costing me too much." Like that's the whole thing, right? With like your Vercel bills and things like that, right? If you don't structure things in a certain way, it can cost you more. So how are you using the AI to like attack each piece of software? Because you can't just prompt to blanket the whole thing to be like, make it more efficient. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't work like that.
I mean, you can. I'm doing that with Codex at the moment, although I haven't clicked go yet. But that's the conversation we're having there. Um, Yeah, so as I've got more to grips with my code base, right, and my repositories, right, I think we're up to 100 repositories now, which is wild.
That's what.
And a bunch of those are duplicates, but and then it's like the app code versus the web code, right? So there's like lots of duplication where that could all be one repository.
Are these
Um,
branches or these individual repositories?
Individual repositories, and that's part of the challenge, right? It's like let's say I have 25 live apps on the Clover app marketplace, right?
Yep.
um, if we say 10 of those are app only, and then the remainder, let's say 15, are um, like either app and web or just web. When you're dealing with web, you have to deal with authentication, right? And so Clover moved over to OAuth version 2, which basically means there's like a double handshake that needs to happen in terms of someone requesting to install something, you sending over to Clover and saying, "Hey, I need an access token. I need to be able to refresh it," and then Clover giving you that back so you can store it and then you can use it, right? And that those tokens are time limited deliberately to mean that unless you make a request to re-access them, like you stop getting access after, let's say, 48 hours or 72 hours. My
Yep.
challenge is like for my 15 apps, they all had a different implementation of that. Now it's like same, but different, but they were all handling that differently in terms of the code that was written. And so I had to go and find the one that worked the best and, basically document that. And now as I'm working through the other apps and going back to them when there's a problem or something else going on, I'll try and take that code and then apply it. And because, on my local machine, I have both apps, right? I can just say, "Hey, you have access to my machine, or I'm giving you access to this folder. Go and look at how this happens in that app, build me a plan to explain, what we need to do and what the test would be." And so that's where I'd be using, something like an Opus 4.6, 7, or 8 with some decent context and thinking to plan that out, right? Um, and then I'd be using sub agents like Composer 2.5, which is a lot cheaper to actually execute that. But what I needed to do to make a lot of that more successful, James, was to have like deployment pipelines or ways for the agents to actually be able to interrogate AWS, right? And so you're mentioning like Twilio and a bunch of these other things.
Yeah.
One of the advantages I've started to build is that now I've like shrunk down the number of external providers. It's like, cool, we're just going to use SSH or SSM to get into AWS. I only have, 12 servers now or 13 servers now. I used to have 19, right? And that's slowly shrinking down. So
That's great.
so by
Awesome.
reducing that down, right? And so I mentioned that I'd done a migration recently for one of my apps. And so um we had a certain server type, right? And did it work? Yes. Was it really old tech? PHP 5, which um, is really old now, right? It's not been supported for many, many years. So most people would be on PHP, let's say 8.4. So as part of the migration, when we were going, well, we're going to update this code to be on PHP 8 rather than PHP 5. We're going to take the database and we're going to also, update that. Let's understand how much are we paying, because AWS has a command line interface for you to be able to query your billing, right, and your costs. Now,
Mm,
I don't understand how that works. I mean, they deliberately make it difficult to understand, in my opinion. They're
of
not as
course.
bad as they're not as bad as Microsoft and Azure, but there's so much complexity there, and there's so many sort of hidden costs if you don't know what you're doing. Right? There's a number of memes on that. Um, but yeah, I was basically able to say, well, what are we spending now? And what would we spend if we change the server type and we reduce down um, the CPUs, or we reduce down the hard drive, or the volume size. And so now that's running faster and it's costing me less money.
Mm,
But that's because I spent time and said, I had like I don't know, I had like 8 plans or something. So I had these 8 different plans, and they were somewhat related to each other. Some of them were independent, but just over a period of time, I was like, "Cool. Well, what's what's the process on the server that's eating out the most amount of CPU credits?" Or when do we have jobs that run for a long time, or they query a lot of information? And so we just kind of, over a number of weeks, we just went through those and figured out what they were, and figured out a better way to do it. Like, I would send emails every morning, right?
yeah.
So you're a vendor or consigner at one of these stores. You want to know every morning, hey, what did I sell yesterday, right? Well, we had a job that would run every day, and it would look for what you sold in the last day, week, and month. And there were days in the year where that would all happen on the same day, right? It was a day, because every day's a day. It was the beginning of the week, and it was the beginning of the month, right? So, like,
Mm,
all of a sudden, 10,000 vendors are about to get an email, 3 different emails with all of this information. That's crazy, right? Not only that, that's all happening at one specific timestamp, which is to say, it was roughly 10 o'clock in the morning my time, 7 in the morning your time. And I was like, well, first of all, that should happen at 6 o'clock, because,
mm,
like, that's before I wake up usually. But, like, that should happen at 6 o'clock in your time zone, and it should happen at 6 o'clock in my time zone. So it doesn't
mm,
need to happen all at the same time. And then for the daily ones, they could happen on the hour. The weekly ones, they could happen at, let's say, 10 minutes past, quarter past, and then the monthly ones could happen at half past. And so it took a little bit of iteration, but now all those emails are arriving at 6 o'clock in the morning, based on the time zone of the merchant, and the server just goes doo-doo, doo-doo, doo-doo. And
nice.
so now I can reduce down, the number of CPUs or amount of memory that I need. Um, but, like, I had to do kind of that work at the beginning, right? Like, understand the nature of the problems that I have, fix those, and then it meant that when we migrated over, and I think I might even be able to reduce it down. But yeah, I mean, like, I think at that point I also started trusting a lot more, right? Whereas before I'd be, like, very hesitant, and I wouldn't let the agents, make changes in production. But as I got more um, comfortable with what that looked like, how I could control it, right? Which is to say, having a sub agent monitoring the server to look for any 500 errors,
Mm,
having a path that I can use to test things, which is using the production database, but it's now new front end code that only I'm using and not everyone else. So I know that
mm,
it works. Once I kind of got some of that stuff worked out, I mean, there aren't enough hours in the day, mate. Like, it
yeah.
really is the case of, like, if I sat here and focused on it, in a couple of weeks, I could have it all worked out. And I'm trying to do that more and more, whereas before I was spread over too many surfaces. Um, but yeah, I mean, just, talk about that 10,000 hours before you can master something, right? You're an expert, and I'm not even halfway there, but I definitely hit this kind of inflection point where I'm like, okay, cool. well, I can't do everything that, you know, Arjun can do and, you know, some other people that we know that are very, very capable.
Yeah.
Just being around those people, hearing the things that they're saying, you know, following the same people. There's a guy that I follow called Matt Pocock. So he develops a lot of skills for coding.
Mhm.
Um, so one of the ones that he has that I really like a lot is called Grill Me, right? And he has Grill Me, and then he has Grill Me with docs. But it'll basically sit there and take whatever you're working on, right? You tell it what the target is, and
Mhm.
it'll ask you like, you know, 10 questions or whatever, and then record those questions. Um, and so there's a lot of time where like the agent is having to interpret based on some history or context, right? Based on some other files, you know, what you mean. But if it could sit there and ask you 5 or 10 questions and explain to you, and in that process, right? Like, give me more detail on that. I don't understand the implications.
Okay.
You can end up, you know, in a much, much better place. So I've been using Grill Me a lot. And then there was another one called Prototype, which I'm not sure of his. Um, and so it basically created like a, you know, uh, like 3 different versions of what I was trying to build with different color palettes and, you know, different shape buttons and call to actions and stuff like that. And
Mm.
"Hey, which one do you like?" I'm like, "Well, I like this from number one. I like this from number three. Cool, done." And so now we're moving forward with that, right? But like, if I'd have just given that to the agent, you know, and to your point around different agents are better at doing different things. If it had just given that to like Composer 2.5, I might not have got really what I want because I don't, I can't actually write that code myself. You know, I know what a good website looks like. You know, I know what it's, you know, when I click a button to log out, it should take me back to the home screen, right? Rather than just leaving me there in an unauthenticated state and I can't do anything,
Yeah.
which one of my apps had a problem doing that. But if you can, if you know how to implement these skills and use them, right, there's no reason why people that didn't study computer science and are not software engineers can't get there, right? I said to you before in text, right? Hard work beats talent. Stole that from another YouTuber that I watched that fixes cars. But it's true. Like you just need to keep on going at it. And you know, when you ask me, am I building tonight? I mean, the answer is yes. Like, does the day end with a walk? Yeah, yeah, I'm building.
Everything.
Uh,
Everything and nothing all at once.
right. And you know, World Cup's coming up. I'd love to watch Scotland play. I don't think I'm going to able to physically be there, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, you just have to keep on waking up every morning and trying to build new stuff or fix stuff that's broken, and eventually something's going to catch fire. So, have you got and you're not going to reveal it now, but have you got a name and a brand all sort of worked out, or are you still working on that part? You do.
Yeah, so definitely have a name, and what's kind of interesting is there could be actually 2 names because
Mm,
of the 2 different
two different
products,
products.
who they're
Yeah.
built for. So one would be customer facing and the other one would be, the other facing. Um, and it just kinda it makes sense, but you know what's funny? Like, I don't know if I've said this to you before, but, like, you know, there's so many different customers for this particular thing. There could be, 3 or 4 different brands for the same thing that does the same thing. It's like a it's hard to explain, but, like, I always, you have the main brand, which is like, um, I don't know, we'll say what's a good example? McDonald's, right? McDonald's is the main brand, but Big Mac is also another brand.
Right.
And there's, like, different segments within, the same company where it does different things, and it's pretty wild, like, and even your brands that you bring on have their own brands. So, like, in McDonald's, there's Coca-Cola, like, there's just so many of those kind of examples. So, and that can become a part of your brand, like, you
Hmm.
associate certain venues with certain brands, so the grouping of those brands and the association of those brands lend to your brand, Um, And I was gonna mention this before because you sparked this kind of thing, like, "Well, what are you building tonight?" Right? Like, the ability for a founder, this is, like, such a key thing, right? The ability for a founder to go literally in the dirt, 0 ground 0, like, literally 1 foot, and then to elevate to 100,000 foot to gain perspective, and then back down to 10 feet, and then to 1 foot, and then back to 100,000 feet and 50,000 feet. The ability to change your perspectives within any given moment of a day is probably, like, one of the most resourceful assets that a founder can have, right? And you talked about this with, like, putting on your customer hat and putting on your, vendor hat and putting on your owner hat and, like, all those things, right? And you're putting on your finance cap and your marketing cap and your, all these things, right? But within those different verticals of your business, there's also just the different layers, right? So for example, like in this one business I'm building, right? Like there's a component where, I have to do a very functional task and it requires a very laid out checklist that says you do this, 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 and this. And it's only 5 minutes of your day to do it. But then it also sets you up for success throughout the whole 8 hours of your shift. Because if you don't do that 5 minute checklist where you check and you say bop, 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 you will never be able to do the rest of the thing. It's kind of like when you're flying an airplane, right? So, like, they go through a checklist, otherwise, they can't turn the engines on, they can't go down the runway, they can't take off, you know? And even when they are flying, they can only land one plane at a time,
Did
like, so
did you ever read the Checklist Manifesto?
for sure, yeah, that's one of the greats.
And yeah, I remember reading that. I was in a particular position where it wasn't critical in terms of like flying a plane or doing a surgery, but we were building processes to take apart iPhones and Vision Pros and other things and put them back together again. And
Yeah,
so, there were certain things that need to get done in order and signed off before you could go on to the next stage, right? Because if you didn't do that part properly, then you can't build a bomb, right? You can't order your tools, right? You can't do an engineering validation. Um, yeah, and so one of the things I definitely learned from that book and then from being in that particular position, and it was something that generally didn't happen very well in the specific segment I was in, is having a feedback process or like a milestone that we would evaluate how that had performed, right? Which is to say, those 8 steps, might be the right one, but in this different scenario, 'cause it's a different product or we're working with different teams, like there needs to be a ninth or a 10th step, right? And then we also need to evaluate how those people did that. So yeah, and once we started building that flywheel, right, of using checklists, but then having a we didn't even it was very woke in that sense where it was like we didn't want to call it a post-mortem because negative language.
you don't
So
wanna
we
offend
called
the dead.
so you don't want to offend the dead. So we called it a retrospective. But we actually implemented one other thing, which I think, particularly for this type of work, right? And maybe it's not applicable to your stuff, but
Yeah,
when you're doing something over a long period of time and you're going to repeat that type of project again, there'd very often be like the big meeting, right? Like the okay to ship, the sign off meeting, and then you're good to go, right? And then it goes to another phase, like someone else is grabbing the ball and running it with
yeah,
it. We implemented something from Manager Tools, which they call the hot wash. I'm kind of okay with that name, but the concept was we have that big meeting, right?
mhm,
And then we'd have half an hour break afterwards, and then we'd come back for 30 minutes and we just draw a line on the whiteboard. On the left, what went well, and on the right, what do we need to take a look at? Right, again, sort of like quite positive language. But then you
yeah,
say, "Oh, documentation was great. Oh, communication wasn't, as good as it could have been. You know, uh, engineering validation went well, right? QA was not as good, and so it's not assigning blame in those two things. It's just saying, you know, these things did go well. These things we need to look at, and then in a week or maybe two, you'd have that retrospective based on that and some other inputs, and that's where you do a little bit more of the, call it finger pointing, right? But it's more kind of, you know, accountability.
You did
Um,
this.
but you don't get there unless you have your checklists, right? And you know, it's really easy for people to not update those things and not tell you when they've last been revised because they know, oh yeah, I know it says that, but you need to do this other thing. You wouldn't do that on a plane, right?
Yep.
It wouldn't be like, oh yeah, don't worry about that checklist. You know,
Yeah,
move the
yeah, yeah.
flapper on this way, you're fine.
We put the wheels down all the time mid-flight, you know?
Oh
Exactly.
yeah.
No, it's real though. I mean, you know, and just to talk about checklists and things like that, like, you know, there's just a when you know, when you're the big boss, like, you have so much domain experience over everything, you
Hmm.
know, like, not only are you just doing the checklist for the plane, but you're also doing the checklist to check people into the plane.
Hmm.
And it's different for each plane, you know, it's like, well, this plane an airport, you know, like, this plane deplanes from the back and the front, you know, like, what's the procedure for that? Like, what's the procedure when it's a smaller private jet and there's only 2 people on here versus 200, you know? So it's just it's very I go back to those systems, you know, the understanding the systems and elevation, you know, of being, you know, right on the ground doing the actual physical thing, like, this is how we make a cappuccino here, you know, like, pour milk here, you know, do this, do that, right? All the way up to, you know, the 100,000-foot level, which is the more philosophical of, like, "Well, why do we serve cappuccinos here?" You know, like, is this the kind of restaurant where you want that, you know? Um,
Well, and you're so involved in your business, right? That you're able to, like, you've had the experience of making the cappuccino, right? Coming up with the process to do that, and then also now asking the big questions. Um, and yeah, I've always felt a lot of the experiences I've had doing the things meant that when I became able to make decisions about the things, I'm not saying they were necessarily better decisions, but I understood, you know, both the implications for the customer externally and the customer internally, right? Which is to say your employee, right? Which, you know, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. And there's a reason why we do it this way rather than this other way. Cause, you know, if we could just do it both ways, then, you know, why would you come to our restaurant, right? Because we do
yeah,
it this way and we do it this way, you know, really well every single time. Um, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So interesting. How do you do your accounting?
Well, I have some accountants that handle that stuff for me, and so, you know, do I have to go into QuickBooks now and again and reconcile some stuff? Yep. But
Yeah,
those guys basically just take care of it. There's like this ongoing thing in the back of my mind in terms of Hermes agent and OpenClaw about me, you know, starting to find parts of the business that I'm paying people for a service that really is just like, well, if you had the knowledge and understanding and the context of like my stuff and things that have happened in the past, and you know, it's 98% the same every year. You know, why am I paying however much I'm paying a month for that?
yeah,
Um, and I realize there's other companies out there that are trying to solve that problem for people. But yeah, I mean, I think um, my accountants know that that's coming as well, right? I don't think they have any intent. I've not heard of them trying to change anything anytime soon, but you know,
yeah,
that business in particular is, you know, even with all of the complexity of things, right?
yeah,
Um, you know, I think once you get above, you know, I don't know, maybe it's 5 million a year or something, somewhere in that sort of range. You know, like, would you trust an AI to do that? Because
yeah,
the likelihood you're getting audited is a lot higher, right? I saw something this week on
for sure.
the percent of, you know, different you know, income levels and what percentage of them get audited. I mean, at the end of the day, right? If you're the IRS, if I can only audit 10,000 people, why would 1,000 of those be people earning under 100,000? Because the amount of time and effort and money it's going to take to find something, right, doesn't translate into, additional tax revenues. So, hey, if you find one big fish, right, that's making 50 million and not paying any tax, like that's, worth however many times, the little people like me. Um,
Yeah. Oh, and it's funny, people don't even realize it's not just the IRS, there's so many other entities that can audit you.
mhm.
Like at the state level, you can get audited for sales tax. You can get audited, in my case, by the liquor authority to make sure I'm paying
Mm.
taxes on the liquor. Like, any agency has authority to audit at some level,
Not always
certain.
just agencies as well, right? When you put your prices on the wall, you
Yep,
have to put those prices as your card price, right?
yep,
Even if you're offering, let's say you sell a pizza for or a slice maybe in New York. Oh no, it's more like to be an actual pizza for $10. You have to advertise that as $10.40 because that's your card price. And if you don't, our friends at Visa and Mastercard are going to find you, and you're going to be in a lot of trouble, right?
yep, yep,
And whether that, I think that is actually state regulation, but they're actively incentivized to make sure people are compliant.
for sure, for sure.
He's making it so, right? Yeah, I have to deal a lot with that with our apps and some of our clients as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. Well, I think we are rounding up on 56 minutes here. That is crazy how quick that went.
I mean, you and I have these conversations fairly regularly. We used to have them a little bit more maybe earlier on in the year, but whenever we jump on, it's usually at least a good hour, right? Until what was the show you guys were watching? I think I was watching it to A Knight's Tale. It wasn't. It was A Knight's Tale or A Knight
Oh,
of the Kingdom.
yeah, 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 yeah. That was a great show. Holy crap.
It went by pretty quickly.
It did.
I mean, I didn't watch Game of Thrones when it was coming out. Like I basically sat down and binged it. So I can imagine that having to wait every week for the next episode, right, would be torture. I'd much rather just binge something. So
Yeah,
but yeah, I don't have any shows on the go at the moment actually. Um
yeah,
Trying
me
not to
too.
get too distracted.
I mean, I've been binge watching the whole thing of Yellowstone, so I went down that path, and
Okay.
apparently they spin up like three other forks of the series, as they do when they figure it out. Oh God, actually saw Mandalorian and Grogu. Really awesome, on IMAX. I was kinda surprised. I like the scale of certain things, like, it
Hmm.
really, it was just it was in the same fashion as the show where it was very, like, adventurous and, like, not too crazy, but there were some moments where it got, a little graphic, a little violent, and I was like, "Okay, Disney, like, that's what we need more of from the Star Wars franchise." I think the best film, and this is gonna I hope somebody watches this and comments and, like, goes, "This guy's an asshole for saying that." I actually think, so far, the best out of all the Star Wars, videos was, Rogue One. I think that was the grittiest version of it so far, and I feel like they need to push it closer to rated R. Like, I feel like they
Mm.
need to, like, really make it like a war movie, like, at least just one really dark thing where it makes everything feel completely hopeless, right? And I think that would make the franchise on a totally different path, and it would light that whole kind of, IP property on fire because then you could redo everything.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be like, happy-go-lucky Ewoks and, jumping around like a bunch of Muppets, like, doing stupid shit. I really think, like, they should make a rated R version of all all the Star Wars, you know?
I
So
mean,
I don't
enough of the fans of the franchise are, 20 plus now, right? I mean, there's always going to be people that are younger that are interested in it too. But yeah, I mean, maybe that's what they go with. I don't have a strong opinion, so I'm going to let you say that and take all the flack for having said it.
they'll be purists. They'll be like, episode what was it? Episode 5 was the greatest, the second one in the original.
Hmm.
But yeah. Anyway, Chris, awesome. We should probably try to structure these if we're gonna do them online and go live because people will probably actually watch it at some point. But I typed into ChatGPT, I was like, this is literally my prompt. I just started I just started a podcast. Give me a list of topics I should talk about.
What
So
did it give you back? Did it give it back like the Iran war, inflation?
no. This is based off of like my chat history. So
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
operator's life, restaurant hospitality episodes, commercial real estate and local businesses, software and AI, founder psychology and reinvention, systems and personal operating systems, and interviews you should do. And then it gives you a list of the best first 10 episodes.
Amazing. Well,
So
send over. It sounds like we have a script for the first season. So
yeah. We should try to we should just do hot takes, one-liner hot takes, where I say, "What do you think of Tim Cook?" No, I'm kidding.
get me in a lot of trouble. Get me in a lot of
Yeah,
trouble.
that
Uh,
nobody knows that's your former boss, you know?
uh, well, yeah, some of the best podcasts that I know about, and some of them, aren't around anymore. Like there's this one that was called The Bugle with a guy called uh, Andy. Is it Andy Zimmerman, or I think it's Andy Zimmerman, and then who's the guy on HBO, the British guy, John? What's his name again? Oh, I can't
Oh,
remember.
yeah. This Night and whatever.
John Oliver.
John Oliver. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, when John Oliver came over to the States, they used to have a podcast that he did for Times Radio or something like that. And so
Yep.
then John Oliver moved to the States, and every week, like he'd call Andy up and they'd have a telephone call, right? Um, and they would just, and they were both comedians, right? So it's just like hilarious chat.
Yep.
And they talk about whatever was going on in the world. And they have stupid things like hotties from history, where they talk about how hot like people were from history. Um,
Cleopatra. Yeah.
yeah. Ooh. Uh,
Yeah.
and so they basically just decided to turn it into podcasts. They're like, we do this every week anyway, and it's a lot of fun. So we should just bring other people along. And then it turned into something a little bit more um, serious, and they got a producer and stuff called Chris. But yeah. Well, I'd be down. So yeah, just let me know next time, and maybe with a little bit more preparation, I'd have something more interesting to say. Which is only that you text me a link, I went and got a tuna wrap, and then jumped straight on. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I was literally like, "What are you doing right now?" I was like, "I know what you're
Well, well, when you said tonight, I was like, oh, it's only 2 o'clock in the afternoon here.
doing." Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wait a second, James is on the East Coast, so add 3 hours. It's already evening for him. So,
Yep.
um,
7-Eleven right now. Yep.
yeah. All right. Well, listen, always good catching up with you, and talk soon.
My brother, I'll talk to you soon. Be well.
Talk to you later. Bye bye.
Bye.